Sermon 44,
We continue our
Tola,
study tonight
Jair,
of the
and
Judges.
Jephthah.
After Abimelech, that wicked judge, first wicked judge, I might add, of Israel, after he had died, God once again raised up another judge to be over Israel by the name of Tola. The Bible doesn't say a lot about Tola. It tells us that he became the judge. He was the son of Puah, the son of Doda, a resident of Shamar in the mountain region of Ephraim. And he judged Israel for 23 years. And of course, he died. He was the seventh judge. And then after Tola, there was Jair, the Gileadite, came after him. And he judged Israel for 22 years. The unique thing about him, the Bible said that he had 30 sons that rode on 30 saddled asses, and he possessed 30 cities in the land of Gilead. And all these cities combined are called Havoc Jared unto this day. And Jared died and was buried in Canaan. And so this is all that the Bible says about these two judges. The next judge that would rule over Israel has a very interesting story. Did not rule very long, but yet the Bible takes time to really tell us about his story. After Jared had died, Israel again fell back into their idolatry. And it's interesting that in the book of Judges, when they fall back into idolatry and they're crying unto God to deliver them because they are being oppressed now by Ammon and the other nations that are round about, God basically says, I'm not going to deliver you. You know, that's what he tells them. He said, I have delivered you out of the hands of all of your enemies, and when I deliver you out of the hands of all of your enemies, then you go back and you worship Baal, and you worship Ashtaroth, and you worship the other gods of all the other major nations, and you worship every god but me. Now that was God's message to the people of Israel through the prophets. He said, you worship everything, but you don't worship me. And then you cry and you say, deliver us because we are being oppressed. They were being oppressed at this particular time for about 18 years. They were being oppressed by the nation of Ammon and the other nations that were round about them. This was the people that we would say that were on the eastern side of the Jordan. But the king of Ammon got brave enough that once that he had oppressed those on the eastern side, he marched his army across the Jordan River over to the western side and decided that he would just oppress Judah and Benjamin and the half a tribe of Ephraim that was on that side. And he said, I'll just oppress them. And he did so. And God listened to the cries of the children of Israel, and the Bible says that his soul was grieved because of their misery. This shows you the God that we serve, the God of heaven. He has put up with a lot at this particular time from the children of Israel. There was times that he became angry with them, and he said to the leaders, whomever it may be, whether it was Moses or Joshua or one of the judges, I'm tired of these people. Because they literally, about the time they began to enjoy the prosperity that God would put on them, they would fall back into idolatry, and God would punish them because of the idolatry, and then they would cry out to God and say, save us, save us. And God will say, well, just go through the prophets. God will say, just go and worship the gods and ask them if they'll save you. Go to Baal and go to Ashtaroth and pray to them and ask them to deliver you. And Israel knew that they could not do that. And so on this particular occasion, the children of Israel began to straighten up. They began to get their house in order. They began to go back to worshiping God and getting away from Baal and Ashtaroth, and God saw the misery that they were under because of the persecution, and the Bible said he was grieved in his soul because of that. And God selected a leader, a judge, that would deliver them from the oppression that they were under. This man that was selected to deliver Israel from the oppression there of the Ammonites was a man by the name of Jephthah. He was a Gileadite. The Bible says he was a mighty man of valor, but it also tells us that he was a bastard child. He was the son of a harlot. And his half-brothers didn't like him. The Bible doesn't tell us how many he had, but the sons of his father's wife, is the way that the Bible describes it, did not like Jephthah because he was illegitimate. And so they ran him away from their home, his parents' home, their home, because they did not want him to inherit with them. They said, "You are the child of a strange woman. You don't have any right to our father's inheritance." So they ran him off. Now this is what the Bible tells us about this man. That he was a man of valor. He was a mighty man. Indicating that here was an individual that was brave. The Bible doesn't say that here was an individual that was perfect. Because the first thing that Jephthah does when he leaves, he goes to the land of Tola. And the Bible says that he sort of gathers some vain fellows around him. Almost like his parents sometimes when if you've got teenagers, they start hanging around folks, and you say to your teenagers, you don't need to be hanging around them. Well, this is the kind of people that he was hanging around. He gathered some vain fellows around him. But he was a strong man. And when the people of Ammon began to oppress the children of Israel, the elders of Gilead decided we need to find someone that's going to lead us and fight for us and deliver us from this oppression. And the man that they had in mind was Jephthah. That we're going to go and we're going to get this mighty man of valor, that he is going to be able to deliver us. And so they came, the elders of Gilead. The Bible says they came to fetch him. They came to fetch him. I think that's a southern word, isn't it? You go and fetch something. But that's what they did. They went over to the land of Tola because they wanted to fetch this man. And so they go over there and they tell him, basically, we want you to come and deliver us. We believe you're the man for the job. We want you to come and deliver us because we are being oppressed. And Jephthah says to them basically, why you come to me? You ran me away. You didn't want to have anything to do with me. He was run away from his father's house. Why do you come to me? He said, you hate me. I'm an illegitimate son. I'm not welcome in my father's house. Why do you come to me? And they said, because we want you to be our captain. We want you to be our leader. We want you to come and reign over us. Now this seems to be a commentary on mankind sometimes. We look to people that are brave to take the leadership. Sometimes character that we assume, the Bible doesn't even tell us about the character of this man, but it tells us about some of the things that surrounded him. Now, like everybody, he made mistakes. But the Bible says that he was a mighty man and he was a man of valor. But I think there's also something here that we find out as we go to the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter. He's listed there in the hallmark of fame of faith. The Bible lists him as a faithful man. So we can assume by putting all these things together that he was a good man. That he was a good man. That as a child coming into the world, he could not select his parents, but he could select what he did. But he was a strong individual. He was willing to stand up against the elders of Gilead and say, why do you come to me? You hate me. You ran me out. I was run out of my father's house, and now you come to me. And the elders said unto him, we come to you now. We acknowledge what you're saying, but we're coming to you now. We want you to deliver us from Ammon. We want you to come, and we want you to be our leader. And Jephthah said, I will. I will on this condition, that after it's over, I'm still captain. I'm still judge. And they said, as God be our witness, we agree to this. And Jephthah's an interesting man. He sent a message to the king of Ammon, and the message was simply this: why do you come out to fight against me? That was his message. Why have you come to fight against me? And you know what the message was? It was sent back. The message from the king came back and said, because you took our land. You took our land. And indeed they had. When God allowed Joshua to go in and march in, he allowed Joshua to go in and take the land. But God wasn't unjust in that, and Jephthah pointed that out to this king. Jephthah said, when my people, children of Israel, were wandering through the wilderness, and they came and wanted to pass through the land, guess what? He said it's not going to happen. They said, let us pass through the land. It's not going to happen. He mentioned the kings that came out to fight against him. Sihon, the king of the Amorites, came out and fought against Israel. The king of Edom came out and fought against Israel. Rather than trying to be peaceable, they came out and they made war. And God, blessing Israel, allowed them to go in and to conquer these nations and to take their land. And Jephthah says to the king of Ammon, why do you come out to fight against me? Are you any better than any of these kings? Because your land was taken away like their land was taken away, does that mean that you're better? That you come out to fight against me, and God has delivered all of these kings, as well as the people that was over the land that he particularly lived in at that time, that God has delivered them into his hand? Another interesting thing that he says to the king of Ammon. They worshiped the god that was called Chemosh. And Jephthah says to this king, go and possess the land that Chemosh will give you. Comparing the greatness of the true and living God to the idols that this king worshiped. He said, go and get him to give you some land. You're not going to get this. It's basically what he's saying. Go and get the land that your God will give you. So Jephthah assembled his army together to fight and to protect the children of Israel that did not like him. He goes to God in prayer and he says to God, if you will deliver me in this battle, if you will deliver me, this is what I will do. When I come back from the battle in peace, whatever comes out of my house that I see first, I'll offer it to you as a burnt offering. This vow that Jephthah made has been called a rash vow. It simply means that this is a vow that he should not have made. God did not want this vow to be made. He did not require this of this man. But he says to God, if you will deliver me, then when I return from the battle, whatever comes out of my house that I see first, I'm going to offer that unto God as a burnt offering. Now that's his vow. He leads his army into battle, and he is victorious over the king of Ammon and all of his mighty army. He defeats them. He goes home as the victor. As he is approaching his house, his daughter comes out to meet him. Not just one of his daughters, his only child. The only child that he has comes out to meet him. As any child who had not seen her father in a while would do that, would come out. Be glad to see her father return. She comes out to meet him. And when she comes out, the Bible says that Jephthah rent his clothes. He was heartbroken. It also describes that when the daughter came out, she came out with timbrels and dancing. She was happy that her father was returning. And he was heartbroken because he had said to God that whatever comes out of my house, whatever meets me first, I'll offer as a burnt offering. And so he rent his clothes, and he said to his daughter, my daughter, thou hast brought me very low. Thou art one of them that trouble me. And then he goes on to say, for I have opened my mouth. You talk about somebody putting their foot in their mouth. He knew he had done that. He said, I have opened my mouth, and I have vowed a vow unto God, and I can't go back on it. I can't go back on it. When I think about this young girl, I think about Isaac. As Abraham said to his young son Isaac, let's go up on that mountain and let's worship God. He gathers together a bundle that he can make a fire with. And he and his young son make their journey up to the mountain. Little Isaac is asking questions of his father, like, Father, here's all the preparation for the sacrifice, but where's the sacrifice? And God says, Abraham says, God will provide. God will provide. Abraham gets to the point and he builds an altar. He takes his young son and he ties him up. He lays him on the wood. He takes a knife that he has from his side and he raises it to plunge into the heart of his son to kill him before he burns him as a sacrifice. But as he is about to do that, God stops him. God stops him. In a thicket not too far away, there's a ram that's caught. And Abraham takes the ram, takes his son off the altar, and he offers the ram. The Bible says that God says Abraham offered his son. In his heart, he was willing to do what God told him to do. God never said to Jephthah, you have to offer your daughter. He made a rash vow. Bible historians say that he did not literally offer her in burnt sacrifice. But the Bible doesn't say one way or the other. It just said that he did what he promised to God that he would do. Jewish history says that she was offered in service to God and remained a virgin all of her life. And she requested of her father that she might go and she might bewail her virginity. And with her friends she went and she cried and was in sorrow because of the vow that her father had made. And the Jewish people recognized this particular day as a special time for them. And the ladies bewail that. But you know, the Bible just says that when she came back from doing that Jephthah fulfilled his vow to God. Now, as I mentioned, Bible historians have two different ideas as to whether he actually offered her. But God never requested that he do that. God never required that. God never asked anybody to do that. God's intention was not for Abraham to take the life of his son, but to test Abraham to see if he would. And Abraham was willing to do it. God said, I know that you offered your only son. You know, God offered his only son on the cross. When Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, Father, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but thine be done. He prayed that prayer 3 times. He would go to the cross to offer himself in sacrifice for the sins of mankind because he was the only thing greater than man on earth. When God created man, he gave him to have dominion over all things that he had created. And because of man's sin, it took the Son of God, the sacrifice on the cross, to take care of those sins. God required his people to be obedient and to live an obedient life. After Jephthah had defeated the people of Ammon, the Bible tells us that he judged Israel for 6 years. But one of the tragedies during that time of his judgment was he had to fight his own people. He had to fight his own people. Ephraim came to him, the leaders of Ephraim came to him, and they were angry with him because he did not ask them or want them, according to them, to be in battle with him. But he had wanted it. They didn't want to do it. They did not see him as the leader that they should have seen him as. And so they came up against him and they said, we're going to burn your house down on top of you. This is how they felt about that. We're going to burn your house down on top of you. And he fought against his own people, against the children of Ephraim. And the Bible says that he defeated them. And that day, there were 42,000 killed. An unnecessary battle, because this was not a battle against the enemy of God's people. This was a battle between God's people. 42,000. A sad time in the life of Jephthah. In the book of Hebrews, as I mentioned, he is listed along with the faithful. Here was a man, contrary to all the things that had happened to him in his life, contrary to the way that he had been treated, when the leaders of the nation of Israel, God's people, came to him and said, we need you. We need you. He was willing to step up and to be counted and to lead the children of Israel and be victorious. At a tremendous cost to himself and also to the nation of Israel, because they did not do the right thing and they wanted to fight against their own people. The study of the Judges is interesting because it teaches many things. And the main thing that we see is it teaches the struggle that God had with trying to keep his people in line. Every time we study about a judge, the reason that we're studying about a judge is because Israel failed to do what they needed to do. They went after other gods. They worshiped and served other gods. They cried unto God, deliver us, and God would give them a judge to deliver them. That's the story of the book of Judges all the way through. As we look at all the judges, the story is going to be the same. Israel sins, and God sends a judge to deliver them. If you're here tonight and need to respond to the invitation, won't you do so while we stand and while we sing?